Dylan Graves watched the steam rise from his coffee cup at exactly 7:13 a.m. when Sierra slammed the apartment door behind her. The sound echoed through their modest two-bedroom like a gunshot, final and irreversible. He didn't flinch. He'd been expecting this moment for 3 weeks, ever since she started working late and coming home with that particular glow that had nothing to do with boutique management and everything to do with someone else's hands on her skin. "I'm done living average," she'd said, standing in their doorway with a designer bag he'd never seen before, her wedding ring already absent from her finger. "I want someone who makes me feel rich, Dylan. Someone who actually has ambition instead of just talking about it." He'd watched her pack, methodical, efficient, like she'd rehearsed it in front of their bedroom mirror. 5 years of marriage reduced 2 suitcases and a carry-on. She left the wedding ring on the kitchen counter, next to the grocery list she'd written in her careful script. Milk, bread, dignity. The irony wasn't lost on him. Sierra Graves had just walked away from more money than she could spend in 3 lifetimes, because she was too busy judging the surface to look underneath. Dylan finished his coffee and opened his laptop. The screen displayed his real bank balance, $12.3 million across 7 accounts, with another $3.2 million in offshore investments and property holdings. The apartment lease was under a shell company he owned. The building? He owned that too, and the 2 adjacent properties. The entire block, actually. Sierra Graves had just walked away from everything she thought she wanted, because she never bothered to look past his deliberately crafted facade. He clicked open a new folder and titled it, The Last Night. Then he started building her file, beginning with the voice recordings he'd been collecting for weeks. 3 months earlier, Dylan had been sitting in a Pentagon briefing room, surrounded by generals and defense contractors wearing uniforms that cost more than most people's cars. They were discussing a $47 million software contract for next-generation tactical systems, artificial intelligence that could predict enemy movements before enemy commanders even made decisions. His company, Quantum Defense Solutions, had just landed the biggest military AI contract in the Pacific Northwest. The check would clear in 2 weeks, adding another 8 figures to his already substantial holdings. He drove home to their Capitol Hill apartment in his 10-year-old Honda Civic, wearing the same off-the-rack khakis he'd bought at Target 3 years ago. The car was registered to a false identity. The clothes deliberately chosen to project mediocrity. Everything about Dylan Graves was a carefully constructed lie designed to hide the truth. He was one of the wealthiest men under 40 in Seattle. Sierra was arranging flowers from the boutique where she managed inventory for women who spent more on handbags than most people made in a year. She had that look, the one she got when she'd spent her day surrounded by wealth she couldn't touch, serving customers whose lives she envied. "How was work?" she asked, without looking up, her voice carrying that edge of resignation that had become her default tone when addressing him. "Same old stuff. Debugging code, fixing servers, dealing with incompetent management." She made that sound, half sigh, half snort. That meant, of course, it was. Dylan had cataloged all of Sierra's sounds over 5 years of marriage. This one meant disappointment mixed with superiority, like she was tolerating his mediocrity out of marital obligation. "Mrs. Chen came in today," Sierra continued, arranging white roses with the precision of someone who'd learned to find beauty in other people's money. "She bought the entire spring collection, $37,000, just like that. Didn't even look at the prices." Dylan nodded, mentally calculating that Mrs. Chen's husband's entire restaurant empire was worth about what he made in quarterly bonuses. The woman Sierra envied so desperately was actually living paycheck to paycheck, funding her shopping addiction with credit cards and home equity loans. "Her husband owns 3 restaurants now," Sierra said, her voice carrying that particular edge it got when she talked about other people's success. "She said they're looking at houses in Bellevue. Something with water views and enough space for entertaining." "Must be nice," Dylan said, playing his part perfectly. "It would be." Sierra finally looked at him, her eyes holding that familiar mixture of accusation and resignation. "If you'd ever take a risk, apply for management positions. Network with people who matter. Do something that doesn't involve hiding in a cubicle all day writing code that nobody will ever notice." He could have told her about the Pentagon meeting, about the federal clearance that required background checks going back to his childhood, interviews with teachers from elementary school, psychological evaluations that lasted 3 days, about the military intelligence training that taught him to observe, adapt, and never reveal more than absolutely necessary, about the house he'd already purchased in Bellevue, 8 bedrooms, 12 bathrooms, infinity pool overlooking Lake Washington, that was sitting empty while he pretended to live in this Capitol Hill apartment. Instead, he microwaved leftover pizza and let her believe he was exactly what she saw: comfortable, safe, and disappointingly average. 3 weeks later, she started staying late at the boutique. 2 weeks after that, she began talking about Craig Kellerman, the real estate developer who came in to buy gifts for his ex-wife's lawyer. "He's different," she said one night, staring at her phone with a smile Dylan hadn't seen in months. "Ambitious. He understands what it takes to build something meaningful in this city." Dylan had already run Craig's financials through his security network: 3 failed developments, 2 bankruptcies, and a current debt load that would make a third-world country blush. Craig Kellerman understood building things the way a match understood preventing fires. But Sierra was glowing when she talked about him, the way she used to glow when she talked about their future together, back when she still believed Dylan might surprise her. That night, Dylan started recording their conversations. The morning Sierra left, Dylan called in sick to his cover job at the mid-level tech firm where he maintained his facade as a struggling software developer. Then he drove to his real office, a corner suite in the Columbia Center with views of Elliott Bay and a secure server room that handled contracts for 17 different federal agencies. The elevator required 2 separate key cards and a biometric scan to reach the 42nd floor. The hallway was lined with unmarked doors that led to offices handling everything from NSA communications protocols to CIA data analysis systems. Cassidy Rowe looked up from her 3-monitor setup as he walked into the main office. "She finally did it? 7:13 this morning. Packed 2 bags and a speech about wanting someone who makes her feel rich." "You want me to activate the surveillance protocols?" Dylan shook his head. "Not yet. Let her think she won something." Cassidy had been his operations manager for 4 years. Former NSA, recruited straight out of MIT with a security clearance that required Senate approval and annual polygraph tests. She knew about Sierra's affair before Sierra did. Data analysis was Cassidy's specialty, and she'd been tracking Sierra's digital footprint since the first unexplained late night. "Her father called the boutique yesterday," Cassidy said, pulling up a transcript on her center monitor. "Audio's clean. He's definitely coaching her." Edward Locke, retired family law attorney with a reputation for bleeding wealthy husbands dry during high-profile divorces. Sierra's father had been suspiciously absent from their wedding, claiming a business emergency that lasted exactly as long as the ceremony and reception. Dylan listened to the call through noise-canceling headphones. Edward's voice, carefully neutral. "Take your time, sweetheart. Let him think it's his fault. Let him feel guilty about not being enough for you. When you're ready to file, I'll handle everything." "She doesn't know about the money," Sierra said, her voice carrying that calculating tone Dylan had learned to recognize. "Good. Keep it that way until we're in court. Washington is a community property state. Once we establish the timeline of marital assets, it's half of everything." "What if he fights it?" "He's a software developer, Sierra. He probably makes $60,000 a year. He can't afford to fight anything." Dylan closed the audio file and leaned back in his chair. "Run a full audit on Edward Locke, business dealings, client lists, trust accounts, personal finances, everything. Already in progress." Cassidy's fingers moved across her keyboard with the efficiency of someone who'd spent years breaking into foreign government databases. "Also, Craig Kellerman's been texting Sierra since 5 a.m. Wants to meet for lunch at that expensive place downtown. Let me see." The messages were pathetic in their desperation. Craig writing like a teenager who'd discovered girls. "Can't stop thinking about you. When can we be together for real? I have plans for us." Sierra's responses were more calculated. "Soon. I just need to handle some things with Dylan first. He's going to be difficult." Dylan forwarded the thread to his secure archive. "I want full surveillance on both of them. Audio, video, financial transactions, social media activity. And get me a meeting with Judge Keel's clerk." Cassidy raised an eyebrow. "Keel's handling divorces now?" "She will be when the time comes." Dylan spent the rest of the day reviewing Sierra's digital life. Credit card statements showing purchases at restaurants he'd never heard of. Uber rides to addresses that didn't match her stated schedule. Phone records showing hour-long conversations with numbers registered to Craig Kellerman and Edward Locke. By evening, he had a complete picture of his wife's betrayal. The affair had been planned for months, coordinated between Sierra, her father, and her lover. They'd moved money around, established new credit lines, even opened joint accounts in preparation for a divorce settlement they assumed would bankrupt him. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Sierra waited 3 days before texting, long enough to make Dylan think she might actually be gone for good. He was in his real office, reviewing security footage of Craig Kellerman stumbling out of a Belltown bar at 2 a.m. when his personal phone buzzed. "Can we talk? I think I made a mistake." The message arrived at 10:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Dylan had been expecting it since Monday afternoon, when Craig's credit cards started getting declined at the expensive restaurants where he'd been taking Sierra. He waited 2 hours before responding. "Sure. When? Tonight? That Italian place we used to go to? Lombardi's, where they'd had their first anniversary dinner, back when Sierra still looked at him like he might surprise her. Where she'd talked about the house they'd buy someday, the kids they'd have, the life they'd build together piece by piece." Dylan arrived wearing the same clothes he'd worn to his fake job: khakis from Target, button-down from Costco, shoes that had seen better years. He found Sierra already seated at their old table, positioned so she could watch the door. She'd dressed carefully, the blue dress that used to be his favorite, hair styled the way she wore it when they were dating, makeup subtle but precise. Her purse was new, Louis Vuitton, probably a gift from Craig before his money problems started. She was performing again. "You look good," she said as he sat down, her voice carrying that intimate tone she used when she wanted something. "Thanks. You too?" The waiter brought wine. Sierra had already ordered for both of them, another performance designed to show she still knew him, still cared about his preferences. Dylan recognized the vintage. $200 a bottle, more than his fake salary could comfortably afford. "I've been thinking," she said, swirling her glass with practiced elegance. "About us. About what I said the other morning." Dylan waited, watching her perform. "I was angry. Frustrated. You know how I get when I feel stuck. When I feel like life is passing me by." She reached across the table, fingers brushing his wrist with calculated intimacy. "Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe? He's not what I thought. He talks big, but he doesn't really listen. Not like you do." Sierra's voice dropped to that vulnerable register she used when she needed him to believe her. "He makes promises he can't keep. Doesn't really listen" was Sierra's code for doesn't have money. Dylan had watched Craig's business collapse in real time over the past week. Investors pulling out, contractors demanding payment, creditors filing liens. "I miss our conversations," Sierra continued, leaning forward so he could see down the front of her dress. "I miss coming home to you. I miss feeling safe. You seemed pretty sure when you left." "I was scared." Her voice broke slightly, just enough to seem genuine. "Scared we were getting too comfortable, scared we'd end up like my parents, just existing together without really living." Her parents had divorced when Sierra was 12, a bitter battle that lasted 3 years and destroyed both their finances. Sierra had spent her teenage years shuttling between them, watching two people who'd once loved each other destroy each other with lawyers and spite. "What are you saying?" Dylan asked, though he already knew. "I'm saying maybe I was wrong. Maybe comfortable isn't the worst thing." She squeezed his wrist, her engagement ring catching the candlelight. "Maybe comfortable is exactly what I want." The performance was flawless. If Dylan hadn't already seen her text to Craig, hadn't already heard her laughing with her father about strategy and settlements, he might have believed her. "I'd like to try again," Sierra said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "If you're willing to forgive me." Dylan looked at her, really looked. 5 years of marriage, and he was finally seeing her clearly. The calculations behind her smile, the agenda behind her apologies, the way she tilted her head when she wanted something, the way she touched him when she needed him to agree. "One condition," he said. "Anything. One last night together. No expectations, no promises, just closure. If we're going to try again, I want to close the book on everything that happened." Sierra's smile was radiant, genuine for the first time all evening. "I'd like that." They finished dinner slowly, Sierra telling him about her time away, carefully editing out any mention of Craig or her father's legal advice. Dylan paid with the credit card linked to his cover accounts, the one that showed a balance appropriate for a mid-level software technician. Sierra didn't offer to split the check. She never did. Outside the restaurant, she kissed him the way she used to before everything became a transaction. Her lips were soft, familiar, tasting of wine and desperation. "My place or yours?" she asked, her body pressed against his. "Yours," Dylan said. "I want to see how you've been living." Sierra's new apartment was in Fremont, a one-bedroom with exposed brick and industrial lighting that cost 3 times their old place. Dylan recognized some of the furniture, pieces from their apartment mixed with others that were clearly new and expensive. "Nice place," he said, examining the space with professional interest. "Craig helped me find it. He knows the building owner. Sierra poured wine while Dylan cataloged everything. The security system, the sightlines from the windows, the sound dampening of the walls. Photo frames on the mantel showed Sierra with friends, Sierra at work, Sierra alone looking contemplative. No pictures of them together. No pictures of Craig either, though Dylan spotted a men's watch on the kitchen counter. I kept meaning to put our photos back up, she said, noticing his gaze. It's fine. She moved closer, wine making her movements looser, more natural. I miss this, just being with you without having to think about everything else. Dylan let her kiss him, let her guide him to the couch, then to the bedroom. Let her believe she was seducing him back into her life, while he memorized the layout of her apartment, the location of her computer, the contents of her purse. The sex was different than it had been in years. Urgent, almost desperate. Sierra clung to him like she was trying to hold on to something slipping away, her nails digging into his back hard enough to leave marks. Afterwards, she curled against his chest, fingers tracing patterns on his skin. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, Dylan said. It wasn't exactly a lie. He loved the woman he'd married, the woman he'd thought she was, but that woman had never existed outside his imagination. Sierra fell asleep first, her breathing deep and regular. Dylan waited 30 minutes, then carefully extracted himself from her arms. He found her purse on the kitchen counter, removed her phone, and connected it to a device Cassidy had given him, a small black cube that could clone data in under 90 seconds. While it worked, he photographed everything. The lease documents on her desk showing Craig as a co-signer. The credit card statements tucked behind a photo frame. The bank records showing wire transfers to accounts he didn't recognize. And, in her bathroom drawer, hidden behind tampons and makeup, a pregnancy test. Positive. Dylan stared at the plastic stick for a long moment. Sierra had taken the test 3 days ago, according to the date written in her careful script on the box. 3 days after she'd texted him about making a mistake. But according to the surveillance footage Cassidy had compiled, Sierra had been with Craig in this apartment every night for the past 2 weeks. The timeline didn't work for Dylan to be the father. He photographed the test and the packaging, then replaced everything exactly where he'd found it. The cloning device finished its work with a soft beep. Dylan pocketed it and returned to bed. Sierra stirred when he slipped back under the covers. Where'd you go? Bathroom. She pressed closer, one leg sliding between his. Stay tonight? If you want. I want. She kissed his shoulder, her lips warm against his skin. Tomorrow we can start over. Fresh slate. Dylan lay awake until dawn, listening to Sierra sleep and planning exactly how he would destroy her life. 2 weeks later, Sierra sent the text Dylan had been expecting. We need to talk. It's important. The message arrived at 2:17 p.m. on a Thursday. Dylan was in the middle of a security briefing about Chinese industrial espionage when his personal phone buzzed. He finished the briefing, then called Sierra back. Can you meet me? Her voice sounded strained, nervous. When? Now? That coffee shop in Pike Place Market? Dylan arrived 20 minutes early and positioned himself at a table with clear sightlines to all entrances. Sierra arrived 10 minutes late, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast Seattle afternoon. She looked tired, stressed. The glow from their night together had faded into something harder. I'm pregnant, she said without preamble, sliding into the chair across from him. Dylan set down his coffee carefully. Are you sure? 3 tests, all positive. When? About 6 weeks. 6 weeks ago, Sierra had been living with him, sleeping in their bed, talking about maybe trying for a baby in the next year or two. The timing was perfect for her story. Is it mine? Dylan asked. Sierra's jaw tightened. Of course it's yours. What kind of question is that? The kind men ask when their wives leave them for other men, then come back pregnant 6 weeks later. I told you. Craig and I we didn't sleep together. Dylan pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph. Sierra and Craig leaving his apartment building at 6 a.m. the day before she'd texted Dylan about making a mistake. Sierra stared at the image. You had me followed? I had myself protected. This doesn't prove anything. Dylan swiped to the next photo. Sierra and Craig in Craig's bedroom window, silhouetted against the light, her dress on the floor. Doesn't it? Sierra's face went white. You have no right. I have every right. You're claiming I'm the father of a child that was conceived while you were having an affair. It's your baby, Dylan. I know it is. Then you won't mind a paternity test. Sierra's hands were shaking. Fine. After the baby's born. Before. There are prenatal options available now. Completely safe. I'm not risking my baby's health. Then we have nothing to discuss. Dylan stood to leave. Wait. Sierra grabbed his arm with desperate strength. Please, I know how this looks, but I swear to you, it's your child. Dylan sat back down. Prove it. How? Stop seeing Craig. Cut off all contact. Move back into our apartment. I can't just... You can't. Or you won't. Sierra looked trapped, her carefully constructed story falling apart. He helped me with the apartment lease. If I just disappear, tell him the truth. Tell him you're pregnant with your husband's baby and you're trying to save your marriage. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Unless there's something you're not telling me. Sierra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need time to think. No, you need time to choose, me or him, but not both. She left without another word, her heels clicking against the concrete as she walked away. Dylan finished his coffee and walked to his car, where Cassidy was waiting with a laptop and a concerned expression. Get everything? He asked. Audio and video. She's definitely nervous about something. Good. How's our investigation into Edward Locke coming? Cassidy showed him a screen full of financial documents. Better than expected. Edward's been moving money around for years. Client trust funds, investment accounts, settlement proceeds. Looks like he's been borrowing against future settlements to fund his lifestyle. How much? Conservative estimate? 3.2 million in misappropriated funds over the past 5 years. And Craig? Completely desperate. His development company's about to fold. He's been promising investors returns from a project that doesn't exist. The Bellevue deal he's been bragging about? Pure fiction. Dylan studied the documents, seeing the bigger picture. Send everything to the State Bar Association. Anonymous tip about Edward's trust account irregularities. And get me a meeting with Craig's biggest investor. What's the play? Sierra thinks she's playing chess with someone who doesn't know the rules. I'm going to show her what war actually looks like. The text came at 2:17 a.m., 3 days after their confrontation at Pike Place Market. I choose you. Always you. Dylan was in his real office, working on security protocols for a new CIA communication system. He'd been expecting Sierra's decision, but not the timing. Panic made people impulsive, and Sierra was clearly panicking. His phone buzzed again. Can we meet tomorrow? I want to talk about the baby, about us, about our future. Dylan called Cassidy immediately. She bit, set up full surveillance for tomorrow's meeting. And check Edward Locke's communications for the past 24 hours. Already on it. He got a visit from 2 investigators this afternoon. State Bar Ethics Committee. They had boxes of documents and a very serious attitude. Excellent. He'll be too distracted to help Sierra strategize. Dylan met Sierra at their old apartment the next evening. She'd been waiting in the hallway, looking smaller somehow, less certain. The confident woman who'd walked out 3 months ago had been replaced by someone who jumped at every sound. Thank you for coming, she said as he unlocked the door. The apartment felt hollow, unused. Dylan had been sleeping at his real place, the Bellevue mansion, since Sierra left, only coming here to maintain appearances with neighbors who thought he was just another struggling tech worker. So, he said, sitting in his old chair, you've made your decision. I want to make this work. The baby deserves both parents. What about Craig? I ended it. Sierra's voice was steady, but Dylan could see the tension in her shoulders. Told him I was confused, that I needed to focus on my marriage. How did he take it? Sierra hesitated. He was upset, but he understands. Dylan pulled out his phone and played an audio recording. Craig's voice, angry and desperate. You can't just cut me off like this, Sierra. We had plans. I gave up everything for you. My marriage, my reputation, my financial stability. Sierra's response, cold and calculating. I never asked you to give up anything, Craig. This was always temporary until I figured out my situation. You recorded our conversation? I record everything now. Dylan stopped the playback. Seems like Craig thought you two had a future together. He was delusional. Was he? Because according to this recording, you told him you loved him. You made promises about leaving your boring husband for someone with real ambition. Sierra's composure cracked. I said what I needed to say to keep him happy while I figured things out. The same way you're saying what you need to say to keep me happy now? No, this is different. This is real. Dylan played another recording. Sierra talking to her father 2 days ago, her voice clear and calculating. Edward Locke's voice. The paternity test will be a problem if the baby isn't his. Sierra. It might be his. The timing works if you calculate from my last period. Edward. Might be isn't good enough for court. We need certainty. Sierra. What are you suggesting? Edward. I'm suggesting you make sure Dylan believes that baby is his, regardless of the biological reality. Dylan stopped the recording. Sierra was staring at him like he'd revealed himself as the devil. You've been recording my private conversations with my father? I've been protecting myself from fraud. This is insane. You can't just spy on people. Actually, I can. Washington is a one-party consent state. I'm allowed to record any conversation I'm part of and any conversation happening in property I own. Property you own? Dylan smiled for the first time since she'd left. My apartment? My building? My block? The color drained from Sierra's face. What are you talking about? I own this building, Sierra. I own the coffee shop where we met yesterday. I own the restaurant where you had dinner with Craig last week. Dylan stood up, walking to the window. Did you really think I was just some average guy writing code in a cubicle? I don't understand. Quantum Defense Solutions. Ever heard of it? No? Pentagon contractor. Artificial intelligence systems for military applications. $47 million contract signed last month. Dylan turned to face her. I'm the majority shareholder. Sierra's mouth opened and closed without sound. The apartment, the job, the car, all of it was operational security. Cover for someone with the highest level defense clearance in the private sector. You lied to me. I protected classified information. There's a difference. Sierra sank into her chair like her bones had turned to water. How long? How long what? How long have you been rich? Since before we met. The company went public 3 years into our marriage. I've been worth more than $10 million for the past 2 years. 10 million? Sierra's voice was barely a whisper. 12.3 as of market close today. Plus, property holdings worth another 8 million. Sierra stared at him like he was a stranger from another planet. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know who you really were. And now I do. Dylan pulled out a manila folder and set it on the coffee table between them. Prenatal paternity test results. Sierra's hands shook as she opened the folder. The documents were official, stamped with medical facility logos, and conclusive. 0% probability that I'm the father. How did you get my DNA? Your toothbrush, the night we spent together. This is illegal. It's my toothbrush. I bought it. You used it without permission in my apartment. Sierra looked like she might vomit. Dylan, I can explain. Can you? Because according to these results, the baby was conceived during a 2-week window when we weren't having relations. When you were, according to my surveillance footage, spending every night at Craig's apartment. The surveillance is illegal too. Public spaces, Sierra, sidewalks, restaurant windows, apartment building lobbies, no expectation of privacy. Dylan sat back down, watching her crumble in real time. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to file for divorce. You're going to request no spousal support. You're going to acknowledge that this baby isn't mine. And if I don't, then I release everything. The recordings, the photographs, the paternity test, the evidence of your father's trust account fraud. My father's what? Edward's been stealing from client accounts for years. The state bar is investigating based on evidence I provided. If this gets messy, I'll make sure they have everything they need to file criminal charges. Sierra was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streams. You're destroying my family. Your family destroyed itself. I'm just exposing the truth. She wiped her face with shaking hands. What do you want? I want you gone. Out of my building? Out of my life? Out of my story. The baby isn't my responsibility. Sierra stood up unsteadily, leaving the paternity test results scattered on the table. You used to be a good man. I used to be a naive man. There's a difference. She walked to the door, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. At the threshold, she turned back. Craig doesn't have any money. He can't support a baby. Then you should have thought of that before you decided to trade up. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Dylan waited exactly 10 minutes, then called Cassidy. It's done. She took the deal. What now? Now we wait and see if she actually files or if she tries to get creative. And if she gets creative? Dylan looked at the paternity test results, still spread across his coffee table like evidence of a crime. Then we get creative back? Sierra didn't file for divorce. Instead, she hired lawyers, expensive ones. 3 weeks after their confrontation, Dylan received papers claiming fraud, emotional distress, coercive control, and intentional infliction of emotional harm. Sierra was demanding half of everything, plus damages for psychological manipulation and breach of marital trust. She's claiming you deceived her about your financial status to gain an unfair advantage in the marriage, his attorney, Marcus Webb, explained during an emergency meeting, essentially arguing that any prenuptial agreement would have been invalid because it was based on false pretenses. Dylan almost laughed. We didn't have a prenup. Exactly. Which means under Washington law, she's entitled to half of all marital assets acquired during the marriage, even if she committed adultery. Washington is a no-fault state. Adultery doesn't affect property distribution unless it involved using marital funds to support the affair. Dylan leaned back in Marcus's leather chair. Marcus Webb was one of the best family law attorneys in Seattle, with a reputation for protecting wealthy clients from predatory spouses, but he didn't understand who he was dealing with. What about fraud? Dylan asked. The pregnancy claim? We can fight it, but proving intentional deception is difficult. She could argue she genuinely believed you were the father. Not the pregnancy, the systematic theft of marital assets. Dylan opened his briefcase and handed Marcus a thick folder. Sierra used marital funds to support her boyfriend's failing business ventures. Wire transfers, credit card payments, cash advances. I have documentation going back 4 months. Marcus studied the financial records. How much? $47,000 in change. Plus, she co-signed loans for Craig's development company, using assets from our joint accounts as collateral. This changes everything. If we can prove she was using marital assets to benefit a third party, I can prove everything. Bank records, surveillance footage, recorded conversations where she admits to the transfers. Marcus looked impressed despite himself. There's another problem. Her father. Edward Locke? He's been calling judges, trying to get the case assigned to someone he knows. Former colleagues, law school classmates. He's got connections throughout the family court system. Dylan smiled coldly. Not anymore. That afternoon, Edward Locke was arrested outside his office building by federal agents. The state bar had moved quickly once they received detailed evidence of trust account irregularities. Edward's law license was suspended pending a criminal investigation that would likely result in federal charges. Sierra called Dylan that night, hysterical and incoherent. You destroyed him, she sobbed into the phone. He's my father. He made mistakes, but he's still my father. He made choices, Dylan replied calmly. Choices have consequences. The baby is innocent in all this. The baby that isn't mine isn't my responsibility. Please, Dylan, I'll drop the lawsuit. I'll disappear. Just leave my father alone. Too late. The state bar doesn't take bribes, and federal prosecutors don't make deals with people who've already broken their word. Sierra's voice turned desperate. What do you want? Money? I'll pay you back every penny I gave to Craig. With what money? Craig's company folded yesterday. His investors pulled out after they learned about the fraud investigation. Silence on the line. You didn't know? Dylan continued. Craig's completely broke, Sierra. His development company was built on lies and borrowed time. He can't support you or the baby. I'll get a job. Who's going to hire the woman who tried to defraud a defense contractor? This is Seattle, Sierra. The tech community is small and everyone talks to everyone. She hung up. Dylan immediately called Cassidy. Security update. I want to know if Sierra tries to contact any journalists, any social media influencers, anyone who might help her spin this story. Already monitoring, but there's something else you need to know. What? Craig Kellerman contacted Sierra 3 hours ago. He wants to meet her tonight. About what? Unknown, but he sounded desperate and angry. Dylan felt the familiar cold satisfaction of a plan coming together. Set up surveillance for the meeting. And Cassidy? Make sure our security team is armed. Dylan arrived at Pike Place Market at 9 p.m., following the GPS tracker he'd placed on Sierra's car weeks ago. She was sitting at an outdoor table with Craig Kellerman, both of them hunched over coffee cups like conspirators planning a revolution. Craig looked worse than his financial situation suggested. Unshaven, wearing clothes that looked like he'd slept in them, eyes red from either alcohol or stress or both. Sierra kept glancing around nervously, checking her phone every few minutes. Dylan positioned himself at a table 30 feet away, close enough to hear their conversation through the directional microphone built into his jacket collar. Cassidy's voice came through his earpiece. Audio is clean, recording everything. Telling you, he's dangerous, Craig was saying, his voice carrying the paranoid edge of someone who'd lost everything and was looking for someone to blame. The way he's been watching us, recording everything, manipulating the system, that's not normal behavior. I know how it sounds, but no, Sierra, listen to me. I've been doing research on your husband. Quantum Defense Solutions has contracts with some very serious people. CIA, NSA, Pentagon black budget programs. So people like that don't just let things go when someone threatens them. They eliminate problems permanently. Sierra's face went pale in the streetlight. You think he'd hurt us? I think he's already hurting us. My business is destroyed. Your father's facing federal charges. This isn't coincidence, Sierra. This is systematic destruction. Dylan adjusted his position, angling the microphone for better coverage. Craig continued. We need to get ahead of this. Take control of the narrative before he destroys us completely. What are you suggesting? Go public. Tell your story. Rich husband hides money from wife, uses government connections to intimidate and harass when she tries to leave. I signed papers, legal agreements. Signed under duress, you can claim coercion, manipulation. Paint him as the villain using government resources for personal revenge. Sierra shook her head. You don't understand what he's capable of. The recordings, the surveillance, the way he knew things about us that should have been private. Evidence obtained illegally. Any decent lawyer could get it thrown out. With what money? My father's legal fees are already bankrupting our family. Craig reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick envelope. I might have a solution for that. Sierra opened it and gasped audibly. Where did you get this? Friend of mine. Private investigator. He's been looking into your husband's business dealings. Dylan couldn't see the contents of the envelope, but Sierra's reaction told him everything he needed to know. She was looking at photographs, and her expression was a mixture of fear and excitement. This is from inside his office, Sierra said. Government facility. Classified materials visible on his computer screen. If this goes public, he'd lose his security clearance. He'd lose everything. The government doesn't tolerate security breaches, even accidental ones. Dylan felt his blood pressure rising, but kept his voice calm when he spoke into his microphone. Cassidy, we have a problem. I'm tracking. Craig's got classified materials from our facility. Whatever Craig had obtained, it represented a massive security breach. Someone with clearance had photographed classified information and sold it to a desperate real estate developer. That made this a federal crime of the highest order. Sierra closed the envelope with shaking hands. This could destroy him. That's the point. He destroyed us first. I need to think about this. Craig grabbed her wrist roughly. Think fast. I'm meeting with a journalist tomorrow morning. Seattle Times investigative reporter, with or without you. Sierra pulled free, standing up abruptly. I said I need to think. This is our only chance, Sierra. Our only shot at getting back what he took from us. She left without another word, hurrying toward the parking structure. Craig sat alone for a moment, then pulled out his phone and made a call. Dylan listened through his earpiece as Craig spoke. It's done. She's got the photos. Meet me at the usual place in an hour with the rest of the payment. Dylan followed Craig to his car, staying 3 vehicles back as they drove through downtown Seattle. Craig parked outside a dive bar in Georgetown, the kind of place where people met when they say didn't want to be found. Cassidy, Dylan said into his microphone, call the FBI. We've got espionage. Already done. Federal agents are en route to both locations. Dylan watched Craig enter the bar, then called his security team. This is Graves. We have a code red situation. Classified materials have been compromised. Authorization to use any necessary force to protect national security assets. Special Agent Patricia Rhodes arrived at Dylan's office at 6 a.m. The next morning, accompanied by 4 other agents and a computer forensics team that looked like they'd been assembled for a counterterrorism operation. Rhodes was in her early 40s, with the kind of direct stare that came from interrogating foreign spies and domestic traitors. She wore her authority like armor, and Dylan could tell immediately that she didn't tolerate games. Mr. Graves, we understand you've been made aware of a potential security breach involving classified materials. Dylan handed her a secure tablet containing the complete surveillance package. Craig Kellerman showed my wife photographs that appeared to contain classified information from this facility. They discussed using the materials to destroy my security clearance. Rhodes reviewed the surveillance footage twice, her expression growing darker with each viewing. You recorded this conversation? Full audio and video surveillance. They were discussing espionage in a public location. We'll need copies of everything. Already prepared. Dylan gestured to Cassidy, who handed over 3 separate secure drives. Complete surveillance package. Audio, video, financial records showing payments to unknown sources, and communication intercepts. The forensic specialist immediately began analyzing the drives with portable equipment that looked military grade. Clean. No malware, tracking software, or foreign code. Rhodes studied Dylan with professional interest. This is a very serious accusation, Mr. Graves. If someone with clearance has been selling classified information, they have. The question is who? We'll need to interview all personnel with access to the materials in question. I've already compiled a complete dossier. Dylan handed her another folder. 23 people have had access to this office in the past month. Cross-referenced with financial records, personal issues, behavioral changes, and communication patterns. Rhodes raised an eyebrow. You've been conducting your own investigation? I've been protecting national security, which is literally my job description. The next 4 hours were a blur of interviews, polygraph tests, and computer forensics. Dylan watched from his office as federal agents systematically eliminated suspects with the efficiency of a military operation. At 11:15 a.m., they found their answer. Thomas Chen, junior systems analyst, had been photographing classified documents with his personal phone for 8 weeks. Financial analysis showed $23,000 in unexplained deposits to his checking account, all traced back to shell companies controlled by Craig Kellerman. Gambling debts, Thomas confessed, when confronted with bank records and polygraph results. Craig said he just needed proof that Dylan was working on classified projects. Nothing specific, just enough to show government involvement. Rhodes turned to Dylan with something approaching respect. Mr. Kellerman is currently in federal custody. We picked him up at 3 a.m. trying to board a red-eye flight to Vancouver. What about the journalist he claimed to be meeting? Fictional. Part of his story to pressure your wife into cooperating. Dylan felt cold satisfaction settle in his chest. And Sierra? That's not our jurisdiction. But I imagine she'll be very interested to learn that her boyfriend is facing 30 years for espionage. Rhodes handed him a business card. We'll need you to testify before a federal grand jury. This case is going to be a high-priority prosecution, of course. One more thing, Mr. Graves. How did you know to start surveillance on these individuals? Dylan smiled thinly. They threatened someone with a top-secret clearance. That makes them enemies of the state. Sierra was waiting in Dylan's apartment when he returned that evening, sitting in the dark like she'd been there for hours. The envelope Craig had given her was open on the coffee table, its contents scattered like evidence of a crime. They arrested him, she said without looking up. Good. The FBI agent said you're the one who called them. I am. Sierra finally met his eyes, and Dylan could see that something fundamental had broken inside her. Craig said you'd destroy anyone who threatened you. I thought he was being paranoid. He wasn't. The agent said he could get 30 years. Selling classified information to foreign nationals. He's lucky they're not seeking the death penalty. Sierra's voice was hollow. There weren't any foreign nationals. The shell companies Craig used to pay Thomas Chen were funded by Canadian investors. Canadian investors with documented ties to Chinese intelligence services. Dylan sat down across from her. Craig didn't just commit espionage, Sierra. He committed treason. He was trying to help me. He was trying to save himself. The classified materials were leverage, insurance against prosecution for his business fraud. Sierra looked at the scattered photographs like they were pieces of her broken life. And I helped him. Yes, you did. Am I going to be arrested? Dylan studied her face. She looked smaller now, broken in a way he'd never seen before. The confident woman who'd walked out of their marriage had been replaced by someone who understood, finally, the scale of the forces she'd been playing with. Not if you cooperate fully. Meaning what? Meaning you testify against Craig. Meaning you provide evidence of his attempts to blackmail me. Meaning you accept full responsibility for your choices. Sierra nodded slowly. And after that? After that, you disappear. New city, new life, new identity if necessary. The baby deserves a fresh start away from all this. What about the divorce? Dylan pulled out a manila folder and set it on the table. Signed and filed. No fault, no alimony, no shared assets. You get nothing, but you also owe nothing. Sierra stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. You're letting me go. I'm letting you live. She signed the documents with trembling hands, her signature barely legible. As she prepared to leave, she turned back one final time. For what it's worth, I did love you. At the beginning, I know, but not enough to choose you over what I thought money could give me. No. Will you ever forgive me? Dylan considered the question for a long moment. Forgiveness is for people who make mistakes, Sierra. What you did wasn't a mistake. It was a calculated betrayal. She left the apartment for the final time, her heels clicking against the hallway floor like a countdown. Dylan waited until he heard the elevator doors close, then called Cassidy. It's over. Clean? Completely. Sierra's relocating to Portland under federal witness protection. Craig's looking at federal prison for the rest of his natural life. Edward Locke is probably going to plea bargain down to 7 years. And you? Dylan looked around the empty apartment. 5 years of marriage reduced to silence and space. The photos were gone, the shared memories packed away or discarded. It was like Sierra had never existed at all. I'm going back to work. 6 months later, Dylan stood in the conference room of Quantum Defense Solutions, watching Seattle's skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The latest military contract had been approved, $127 million for next-generation battlefield AI systems that would revolutionize modern warfare. His net worth had crossed $25 million. Cassidy knocked on the doorframe. The FBI wants to debrief you on the Chen investigation final report. Findings? Thomas Chen got 15 years in federal prison. Craig Kellerman got 25 to life. They found evidence he was selling information to 3 different foreign intelligence services. The Canadian connection was just the beginning. And Sierra? Working as a retail manager in Portland. Baby was born last month. Healthy girl. She's keeping an extremely low profile. Dylan nodded. He'd kept loose tabs on Sierra, not out of affection, but out of operational necessity. People who knew classified information required monitoring, even peripheral people who'd never had clearance. Sir? Cassidy hesitated at the door. There's something else. What? Edward Locke died in prison yesterday. Heart attack during his morning exercise. He was 3 years into his 7-year sentence. Dylan felt absolutely nothing. Sierra, no? Portland PD notified her this afternoon. She requested that no one from his past attend the funeral. Dylan turned back to the window, looking out at the city where he'd built his fortune and destroyed his enemies. Sierra was truly alone now. No father to manipulate her decisions, no boyfriend to enable her fantasies, no husband to support her mistakes. Just herself and a baby whose father was serving federal time for treason. It was exactly what she deserved. His secure phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you did to my family. Dylan showed the message to Cassidy. Source? Cassidy ran it through their security system. Prepaid phone, purchased with cash in Portland 4 days ago. Location services disabled. Sierra? Most likely, or someone she's told her story to. Dylan deleted the message without concern. Monitor all communications from Portland. If this escalates beyond idle threats, I want to know immediately. What if she goes public, tells her story to the media? Dylan smiled with cold satisfaction. Then we release everything. The recordings, the paternity test, the evidence of fraud and conspiracy. Let the world decide who the real villain is. Another text arrived. You destroyed my family. My father is dead because of you. Now I'll destroy yours. This time, Dylan didn't delete it. Instead, he forwarded it to his security team with instructions. Activate Protocol 7. Full surveillance on all known associates of Sierra Graves. Threat level, significant. Cassidy read the message. She's escalating to direct threats. Letter. I'm very good at handling threats. Dylan looked out at the Seattle skyline, thinking about the life he'd built and the enemies he'd made along the way. Sierra had tried to play games with someone who'd spent years in military intelligence. Someone trained to identify threats and eliminate them systematically and permanently. She'd lost everything. Her husband, her father, her lover, her future, her hope. But apparently she hadn't learned her lesson about the consequences of threatening him. Dylan pulled out his secure phone and opened a new folder. He titled it Sierra Graves, Final Solution. If Sierra wanted to continue this war, he'd be happy to finish it. After all, he was very good at making problems disappear completely. The game was over. But Sierra didn't seem to understand that she'd already lost. 3 months later, Dylan received a call from Portland Police Detective Maria Santos. "Mr. Graves, I'm calling about Sierra Graves. She was found dead in her apartment this morning." Dylan set down his coffee carefully. "How?" "Apparent suicide, pills, and alcohol. She left a note." "What did it say?" "That she couldn't live with what she'd done. That she was sorry for the pain she'd caused. That she wanted her daughter to have a better life than she could provide." Dylan felt nothing. "The baby?" "Safe. Social Services is working on placement options." After the detective hung up, Dylan sat in his office for a long time, looking out at Elliott Bay. He'd won completely. Sierra was gone, her father was dead, her lover was in federal prison. Every threat to his life and reputation had been eliminated. But somehow victory felt hollow. Cassidy appeared in his doorway. "Sir, the Portland situation?" "Resolved." "I'm sorry." Dylan looked at her curiously. "For what?" "I know you loved her once." Dylan considered this. Had he loved Sierra, or had he loved the idea of her, the performance she'd given him for 5 years? "Schedule a meeting with Family Services in Portland," he said finally. "Sir, the baby. She's innocent in all this. Make sure she gets placed with a good family. Wealthy family. Set up a trust fund. Enough for college, medical expenses, whatever she needs." Cassidy nodded. "Anonymous donor?" "Completely anonymous. She doesn't need to know where the money came from." Dylan turned back to the window. Sierra was gone, but her daughter would have every opportunity Sierra had denied herself through her choices. It wasn't forgiveness. Dylan didn't forgive people who betrayed him. But it was justice of a sort. Outside his window, Seattle continued its relentless growth. New buildings rising where old ones had been torn down. Progress required destruction, Dylan reflected. You couldn't build something new without eliminating what came before. His phone buzzed with a message from his security team. "All threats neutralized. Resume normal operations." Dylan deleted the message and went back to work. There were new contracts to negotiate, new enemies to identify, new problems to solve. The game never really ended. It just moved to a new board.